calling this part 5?
This is 6.
For real? God damn.
We're already at 6, yeah.
Shit, dude.
Stitch Gang, welcome. Stitch Gang 6. Or Zone 6, as it were.
Oh, wow.
The return of Mr. Zone, Mr. Stitch 6, something like that. I'll come out. Well, that's the first draft. You'll see the final draft in the title. I'll have something that is better than that.
The State versus Stitch Gang, or Stitch Gang versus Radric Davis.
I think yeah, Stitch Gang versus Stitch Gang the Tour versus Radric Davis would be great. Actually, I think we're gonna put him on trial towards the end of our review. So this week we're talking about the autobiography of Gucci Mane. I majored in comparative literature, so I'm putting my degree to use. And I might be dropping some terminology that if you only like music and MMA, you might not get. Just pause your podcast app and look it up, and But I'll try not to get too deep with it. What did you major in, Tyron?
I majored in finance and accounting, so.
Oh, okay, so for the
I just looked at numbers all day.
Okay, I mean, but for the business parts, you probably got that more. When he had the quibbles with Big Cat over QuickBooks, you were like, yeah, I know what those spreadsheets look like.
Yeah, I want to know where Gucci Mane got his analytical skills. I wonder who told him what to look for. If he was I just imagine him sipping on lean and looking through some ledgers and journals and shit.
Well, he says it. He says it's Big Cat taught him how to look or maybe it was the guy he went with after Big Cat, and then he went to Big Cat.
Duke or something like
Duke?
that.
Yeah. Sure, there's a lot of names here. What'd you think of the UFC card last night?
It was fucking awesome, but really depressing because I love Jose Aldo, and the whole time that during that fight, I felt like it was just inevitable that he would tire out, and then Max Holloway would take over, which happened.
It was just an aesthetic level. I did kind of like it because Jose Aldo has such beautiful defense, but in a normal fight, let's say versus Frankie Edgar, someone who's throwing a few punches, he'll defend it and it won't hit him, and then he'll kind of reset. But with Max Holloway's always throwing, and you can see all these different moves that Jose Aldo has. They just got to him eventually, but it was nice to see his technique replicated over and over again.
Yeah, he had ridiculous head movement, and especially in the third, he did something of an Anderson Silva impression where he stayed against the fence and just bobbed and weaved, and I was just screaming the whole time, what the fuck are you doing? This, I was you're gonna get knocked out, and then he started brawling with Holloway, and I was screaming that you're gonna tire out, and then he's gonna knock you out, and then.
Well, he caught him a couple times. He caught him with this uppercut, which I mean, I feel like he fought pretty much the best fight. I guess a lot of people wanted him to kick more, and he did more than in the first fight, but it still wasn't enough.
I mean, I think against anybody else, that kind of defense and smart offensive game would have worked a little bit easier. But just because Max Holloway is super dynamic, and one thing I like about his game is that he feints a lot, which really plays against Aldo's defensive reactions. Because in normal circumstances, against somebody that doesn't really feint as much, he definitely comes with the proper reactions, and he slips or. For example, and he did this against Frankie Edgar, but when Max Holloway would throw a hard right, you would just see Aldo slip and then, pivot out and come up with a step. But after a while, Max Holloway started switching it up and wouldn't allow for that, which was, fucking genius.
And we had Ngannou versus Overeem, which is amazing as long as it lasted.
Yeah, we witnessed a murder on pay-per-view last night.
It's so weird. I mean, when I went to 217, it was, I mean, I'm not going to say cool, but it was interesting to see when the crazy knockouts happened. Like when Firas Zahabi's brother got knocked out. In the very first fight, he was on the mat for a minute or two. And the Joe Rogan was going on and on about how Overeem was out and his toes were curled up, but the camera wasn't showing it at all. Which I guess that's a good broadcasting decision. But then probably your announcer shouldn't go on and on about what a sight it
How he's
is.
still, yeah, yeah. And the fucked up thing is that Alistair Overeem, while he has been finished and knocked out in the past, I don't think anything has been as like final or like as devastating as that knockout from that he received from Francis Ngannou. It was insane. Like at first, it looked Ngannou looked kind of somewhat hesitant when the first round started, and just judging his body language, I was talking to my friends. I was like, okay, I think he is in for a rough night just because of his body language. And then when they went into that first like close exchange after they had broken from the clinch against the cage, man, it was nuts. That dude is real scary.
And so, also relating to Stitch Gang, I had it on mute, but you told me that Tisha Torres came out to Dreamer by Charlie XCX, which is amazing.
Yep, awesome.
So she's the official Stitch Gang strawweight.
Yeah. No offense to the hometown hero Michelle Watterson, but Tisha Torres has great taste apparently.
Yeah, hell yeah. And of course, Alvarez and Gaethje was crazy. That was insane.
Not as insane in my opinion as Cowboy Oliveira versus Yancy Medeiros. That was an insane fight.
I didn't catch the end of that, so I mean I did I mean I'm sorry, I mean I only caught the end of it.
It was crazy. I think it's a fight that you would write for a movie or something of the sort, just because of the dramatic swings and momentum,
Right.
and then ultimately the finish. It was a really great fight, a definite fight of the year contender in my opinion.
Oh, something else. Oh, did you end up going to see Ladybird?
Not yet. I'm gonna be. I think I'm gonna do that after this. Actually, there's a showing that starts at 7:30 my time, so I might do that.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna go before, so we could talk about it.
I know. I ended up going to Payway and then eating a bowl of pozole at my friend's parents' house. So I feel awful. There was no. I was sleeping on my couch, so there was no movie.
All right, so let's get to the book. Co-written with Neil Martinez Belkin, who I guess he's a music writer for Double XL. I hope there's something of him reading it online. Maybe. Did you see anything like that?
I think there's an audio book, but I don't think it's him reading it.
Oh, I wonder who they hired to read it.
After I read this book, I felt really bad. I feel really bad about talking about how much I miss fat, drugged up Gucci.
Right?
Yeah, I was just like, man, he's been through some shit. But I miss that like drawl, that lean induced drawl.
I mean, well, you can trace it. You can trace his career exactly what drugs he was on. So you can just say, I miss chicken talk Gucci, or whenever,
Yeah.
before he started doing the lean.
Or Diary of a Trap God Gucci,
Yeah.
which he claims to be his most like drug induced album. Like he says he slurs the most on that. So I went back and visited that tape, and he sure does. It's really good. It's really
I
good
meant to
tape.
listen to that one, but I didn't get a chance to listen to it after I read that. Wait, but you think it's good even though he was slurring?
Oh, that's my. I think that I prefer that. I think that particular sound. I mean, it's like the same with Lil Wayne, where I prefer a lot of his output that he released when he was doing a lot more lean, like the Drought 3 and a lot of those era tapes.
I mean, a big problem with someone someone who was addicted to opiates for the most important part of their career, writing a memoir, is that I feel like he probably doesn't remember a lot of what actually happened. You kind of get the sense that it's being like pieced together and forced out of him, and conjectured. I mean, I guess I don't want to get to like my main criticisms of the book yet, but yeah. So if you, I think like if like us, you're interested in his career, and I think if you're interested in just what trap, I'll say was, this is like a 4 out of 5. And if you're just a general reader, maybe it's a 2.6 out of 5, something like that. Um, yeah, but the beginning is awesome. You learn about how his father was called the Gucci Man, and he adopted that, which is so interesting because like you hear him a lot of times. You hear him slip into a third person a lot of times, and it's always like, "Huh, that's weird." But you could also just be like adopting his father's persona when he's recording or something. So that was like a good background. There was like so many things here that especially in the beginning of part 1 that is amazing where he talks about stuff that he's doing and then points out where in his lyrics he said it literally, like
Hmm.
the Texaco stuff and how he robbed some guy for 50 grand. Um, yeah, with the Texaco, he talks about the specific, Chinese owner of the store trying to kick him out, or probably a Korean. I think his name was Kim. Um, yeah, that stuff is great. And it gives you an excuse to go back and listen to that really early stuff, which I hadn't listened to a lot of the early stuff, like his very first tape, La Flare.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that's one thing I really liked about the book is that you got a point of reference. So, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but the his expansive discography is a little overwhelming. So whenever I feel the need to do something of like a deep dive or go on a marathon, it feels a little bit exhausting. But I feel like the when you have something of an accompaniment, like the specific verses that he includes in the book, I felt a little bit more encouraged to go back and revisit them, and the listens became a little bit more personal because I clear, there's a clear relation now. Like you have a point of reference, so it's a little bit easier to digest. So I feel like that's what made a lot of the revisiting I did super enjoyable.
Same. When I went back to listen to everything, it was really cool. I mean, just scrolling through his Spotify, he's uploaded a lot of his mixtapes. Is just a chore. Um, well, I guess I could do the Square View. Oh, we're getting into more Spotify inside Spotify shit. I guess I could do Square View to find the mixtapes easier. But yeah, and also there's stuff that I didn't track when I was listening. Well, I personally got into him around like 2011 or so. He put out The Return of Mr. Zone 6, which he talks about as being one of his darker moments when he had just gotten out of jail and he was telling Drumma Boy and Zaytoven I think that tape was only Drumma Boy. He was telling them just play the play darker stuff. And he
Mm-hmm.
put out one of the songs on there was Shout Out to My Set. And I was following Yams from, well, we didn't know he was Yams. It was just Real Nigga Tumblr
Yeah,
tumblr.com. I
yeah.
was following him at the time, and he posted that song, and he described it as Gucci going in on Mortal Kombat, and I played it, and it was just I just fell in love with that song, and the whole tape is
Mm-hmm.
similarly dark. So it was weird reading it and then seeing that his state of mind was just being fed up, hating himself, just telling his people to like play the most fucked up sounds. And actually, he didn't really like that one, even though I thought it was great. But I mean, it's kind of something that's not sustainable.
Yeah, clearly it wasn't healthy. The mindset,
Right,
that he was
exactly.
in.
Oh man, but that I've listened to Shout Out to My Set so many times, but now I just got the line where he was like, "Shout out to my AR, my Tech 9, my AK," which is now I realize that AR is a double entendre for
His
his
gun
and a
and
rep.
a rep.
Yeah. Wait, what is it like? What does the A stand for?
I don't know. I was actually gonna
Wait,
try to
yeah,
spell that
fuck.
out.
Hey, let me just look it up. Artist and repertoire.
Oh, weird. Okay.
That's not easy to remember.
No, not at all.
Uh,
A and R rep is way
uh,
easier. Yeah. So that was your first exposure to Gucci Mane.
yeah, I mean, I had probably heard different stuff, but that's when I got into it, when I became a fan of his.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Mine was it's kind of embarrassing. um, well, I had heard a track off Chicken Talk, and I do believe that it was "Swing My Door" was the first
Hmm.
track I'd heard. But I clearly didn't become I didn't become familiar with it. I didn't really do a whole lot of follow up until I heard a series of Gucci Mane remixes that the Witch House group Salem had done. And I don't know if you've heard any of those, but they did a remix of Bird Flu, which I was really into.
Oh
And
shit, I did listen to those.
yeah, yeah,
I remember that.
and so that made me curious, and so I actually in 2010, I believe, is when it dropped. I downloaded Mr. Zone 6, the mixtape, and was hooked like automatically. I mean, there's some super good tracks on that tape.
I thought you were going to say you discovered it with the Diplo remixes, the cold, and then you said something even more embarrassing. So
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so you're welcome. Hey, I saw Salem in 2010, and it was pretty tight. It was pretty tight.
oh, cool. So you get a timeline of what drugs he's on. Actually, someone should do this. Just make like a chart, the releases side by side with the jail time, the drug intake, and
Like what
and
mixtape like came out around the time?
right, and also the label he was on. I think he created the Straight Drop Crew. That was like the original one. Then I think he went to the dude, the Big Cat. Um, and then he did I think he did the Warner subsidiary with Deb
With
Antney.
Asylum. Didn't he do something with Asylum too, or am
Right.
I?
Right. I maybe think that Asylum was a subsidiary of Warner.
Yeah, yeah.
Am I wrong? Something like that. But it was with Deb Antney. It was the So Icy crew, and then he was with Atlantic. No, then he was with Warner by himself with 1017 Brick Squad, and then they gave him permission to do stuff on his own on the side. So, for example, the Return of Mr. 76 was like a commercial mixtape. So he started putting out commercial mixtapes, and they sold pretty well. And actually, Gucci he's like one. First, and I can't think of any other rappers who have their own Bandcamp page. He did that like a few years ago, and he has all his mixtapes up on Spotify, which not a lot of people do. And if they're on Spotify, I assume you can buy them on iTunes as well. So he's into operating outside of the label structure.
But actually, I couldn't find Trapback on Spotify when I looked. Which I think that's my favorite.
Is that the?
It's an
Trapback?
all. Fuck, I can't. It's Who is
Was
it?
that from like 2013 or?
It was 2012.
Oh, I remember. Wait, I think I remember that. I don't know. There's so many ones that have
Yeah,
trap in the name.
it was predominantly Mike Will Made It beats.
Yeah, I love when he goes to working with different DJs, especially the DJ part, because you kind of if you're getting into trap and you're downloading mixtapes, you just think of DJs as intrusive voices that are yelling over your music. And Gucci kind of goes into the creative process and how he worked with each one. For example, like Writing on the Wall was like a concept that I think it was Holiday came up with, and Gucci talks about how he thought it was lame, but it kind of fit, and it's become iconic now. I mean, which maybe is just because it was such a good mixtape, but it's become iconic as his comeback tape. And the story he tells about doing First Day Out is awesome, where he just freestyles it and everyone's amazed and everyone's like, Gucci's back. And actually, when I looked that up on Spotify, I saw like so many rappers had done their own versions of First Day Out, including Kodak Black and Chief Keef. And Chief Keef actually just wholesale like rips like several bars from it just to be overtly paying homage. So yeah, we start with his childhood. He started selling weed in 7th grade, just crazy. Yeah, he was actually I guess his mom was a teacher, so he's very well read at least. He learned to read ahead of most people, which probably helped him later on. Well, I mean, it's kind of chicken and egg thing, but it gave him his love of words, basically. Oh yeah, the detail about selling his CDs with weed and crack is fucking insane.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
it's I mean it's crazy even throughout like how far into his music career he was still doing stuff in the streets.
Yeah,
Like he would become frustrated with music and then just start and then go back into the streets again.
yeah.
You
He
know?
would just hit the Texaco. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the sort of like economy with. I mean, did you ever buy like mixtapes?
No, honestly, well, yeah, because my first exposure to them has always been over the internet and just downloaded them off like Dat Piff or Live New Hip Hop or whatever.
I like developed a love for rap later on. I mean, but I remember like bootleggers being in the street selling CDs,
Mm-hmm.
and around the time that 50 Cent was really hot in New York, and he was selling millions of copies just through like this underground network.
Yeah, it may have just been a regional thing, because in Gallup, New
Hmm.
Mexico, I don't think I don't recall seeing dudes peddling mixtapes. But I mean, in the few
Okay.
instances that I have been in larger cities, such as maybe San Francisco or New York, it's definitely been it's been something I've seen a lot more. I've definitely been offered to, I've been offered mixtapes, but that's not something that's very prevalent out here. So
Yeah. So yeah, and that's something that's gonna disappear because I feel like people. I mean, yeah, whenever you get offered mixtapes in the cities, I assume whoever is doing that is like a shitty rapper because it's like a really or like I just assume like they don't even rap and
hmm
they just they're kind of just race hustlers and
hmm
they have these generic rap mixtapes and they give it out to people and then try to get donations. I mean, maybe I'm being cynical because like like why if you're a rapper why aren't you in the studio
mm.
making music? That's a much better use of your time than trying to get donations from Australians in Times Square.
Yeah.
We should do an episode where we review just a random mixtape off the street.
Yeah, I was actually just about to say when I'm out there, if we somehow manage to encounter anybody that's selling a mixtape, then we should probably do that, buy it, and then give it a pretty good listen. Because after all you said, it's funny to think about all these now famous legendary rappers and their pasts with selling mixtapes on the street or
Hmm.
selling CDs out of their trunks, and
Hmm.
it's kind of hard to tell, like I mean maybe the guy whose mixtape I rejected outside of a record store in San Francisco, who knows how good that might have been.
Hmm.
But at the same time, if it's
And that guy was E40.
that guy was Mac Dre.
All the like street stories kind of lead into how he towards the end he says something like really interesting, which is I mean when he's recruiting who was it? I think Pee Wee Longway.
I think it's Young Scooter.
Yeah, young Scooter. He was just like, oh, this guy's like a real street dude. Like, I don't even care if his music is good at all. It's just like I like being around that, which
Mm-hmm.
is probably not good for violating your probation. If only he had just been like to be around that, but not,
Not like
but
get
maybe
back up in the
smarter.
streets. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but um, yeah, but actually maybe that's part of his artistry is kind of being more plugged in. I mean, some people when they probably make the amount of money that he made would wanna, like Chief Keef. He, as soon as he made it, he moved to L.A.
Yeah, and plays paintball. Yeah.
Now he plays paintball. I mean, but well, that might not be a good example because he wasn't like, as far as I know, he wasn't like like a hustler and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say if he had done that, moved to Miami, uh, as soon as he made it, he wouldn't have been plugged into this scene, which is like one of the most uh, you know vibrant scenes in like pop history. It's like Atlanta is like so important, um, and I think this book will be even despite the its demerits as a literary work of art, it is a pretty good document to help people will look at to try to figure out like Atlanta
Has
um,
it?
in the
Is that something
odds.
you've been seeing? The people discrediting the book itself?
No, no, no. That's just what I'm saying. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I could see people with a more refined palate, not necessarily taking the book seriously. But I mean, but like you said, it's a rather good, accounting of this specific individuals, and especially for people that may have like, flirted with the idea or flirted with Gucci Mane tracks.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it'd be a really good starting point for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I could. I mean, yeah. I've tried not to read any reviews of the book so far. I think I looked at one that maybe was critical of it. I mean, specifically, they were critical of the. Oh, I think I looked at the New York Times review. It was in New York Times, so it was probably by John Caramanica or maybe, and they specifically criticized how he talks about the incident where he threw the woman out of his car, and it was apparently a moving vehicle, and then he says it wasn't, and she was never in any danger, but he still pled guilty. It did sound kind of fishy, but yeah, I definitely understand him a lot better. I just wish there were details that were more fleshed out, and like I said, it could be just an issue of him not remembering this shit.
Yeah. Or like we were discussing before we started recording, just an issue of, legal conditions perhaps. Well,
Right, right.
obviously, I think in most cases, especially the alleged murder, yeah, I feel like that
Wait,
might just be
tell
some
me,
legals.
say what you were telling me before we started recording.
So when he goes to jail or he gets indicted because of him murdering somebody in self defense, he claims it was one Pookie Loke. He claims that because of a bounty that young Jeezy had on his chain, this fella Pookie Loke and some cats attempted to rob him, and in doing so, Gucci fired a weapon, killing Pookie Loke. And after the fact, claimed it was in self defense, but the Pookie Loke's body was found half buried in the forest. So, like, I don't think I think it's probably smart to not go into detail in that particular instance, but
Hmm.
there are just certain things like that with his legal issues, that I'm like super curious about.
Yeah, I feel like that he didn't mention anyone getting buried in the book.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. You just meant it. Just seems like, oh, I tried to get robbed and I shot somebody.
yeah,
Somebody tried to rob me and I shot somebody, and that's it. Yeah,
there
but
was a whole bunch of bullshit about it. Anyway, I got off. Then I went to the studio to hang out with Swiss Beats. No, I went to Swiss Beats' house. This is how many cars he had, and then he said I had a murder charge, and I was really embarrassed. And it's like the being embarrassed part is really endearing, but I mean, I guess it would only work if he makes it clear that he thinks he was innocent. I mean, and he did get off, so. And also, like, whatever, if you're a career criminal and you murder someone and I'm sorry, if and you kill someone in self defense, you might just think that you're gonna get locked up no matter how innocent you are for that particular crime.
Mhm.
Um, Whatever. So I mean, that could go either way. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like when he talks about Big Meech and how they were taking over Atlanta. He says, that's someone else's story to tell, and he says that a lot.
Mhm.
Which I mean, it is whoever. It's up to Big Meech and Young Jeezy and whoever to tell that story, but also you could just give us some context.
Yeah,
Um,
most definitely.
there's a lot of stuff that like details that are missing, like when he goes to jail on something, probably I think a parole violation, and he says, and all I could think about was my son. That's right. 10 months before, I had found out that this girl that I used to date had a son, and everyone was saying it looked like me. After I got her to take some paternity tests, turns out it was my son. So I was thinking
Yeah.
about him, and I was like, why didn't you insert that when it happened? You don't. The reason you don't do that is because then when you go to jail, at the moment you go to jail, people are thinking, what the fuck? He just found out he has a son, and now he's going to jail again? What a fucking idiot. But so that's why you don't include it. But then when it comes back in the end to just make you seem like sympathetic in prison, you feel like you were manipulated. There's that. I mean, at the end when he talks, I noted. What was the last thing that sent him to prison? It was just walking around with a gun.
Yeah, and marijuana. Yeah,
Yeah.
violating parole, like, and that whole sequence of events was like pretty wild. Like he was basically like in a drug induced, like, I don't know, just he had a drug induced episode and
Mm-hmm.
just wandered around with a gun in his pocket and talking to cops and getting like irritated with cops. It's hilarious. Like I wasn't aware of that particular instance.
Mm-hmm. And then in that part, he kind of he takes the um he takes the police report and inserts it into the book, and then hardly comments, on his own thoughts, either in the moment or retrospectively. It's kind of just put in there as something. He spends more time on his workout than how he felt during the trial, or
Mm-hmm.
um, how he ended up there. A lot of the primary sources that are inserted, like the record reviews and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, they to me they just gave off like an air of emotional disengagement. Like he didn't care at the time or now, but here's what people were saying, and so to give you context. So that's just where I thought, like, even though we did, we got like a lot of facts out of this, we could have gotten a much better book.
Oh, most
You know.
definitely. And like and because what, like, there's maybe a chapter dedicated to his most recent stint in prison,
Mm-hmm.
and it mostly centers around him. He recounts the withdrawals he had
Yeah.
when he was locked up after he had gotten really into drinking lean, and then he just talks about working out and more or less, he talks about the gang situations in prison, but outside of that, yeah, he doesn't, like, he kind of ruminates on it and his time and his feelings towards the end of the
Mm-hmm.
book, like the last 2 or 3 pages, if that. But I think, like you said, it might have been a little bit more beneficial and made the book a way more better read if he had, maybe perhaps tried to recount those thoughts in maybe each of his prison stints. And like you mentioned, he may just not remember or may not have cared enough to.
Right. He was in federal prison for how long? Like 2 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yes.
he kind of just like zooms by it. I mean, which is, he's out. He's sober. I think he's married, so I could see him not wanting to dwell on that. Another thing he could have talked about more is like, like he gives us one awesome detail about this hotel suite that has a shower in the middle, and he would be fucking two women and watching two women showering each other in the middle of the room. Like I
Mm-hmm.
needed
Mm-hmm.
like way more details like that, about how he was blowing all this money on drugs and women. Like when he talks about going back and forth to Las Vegas to play craps and party,
Mm-hmm.
there's not nearly enough details like that, which is like understandable because maybe because he's married now, he doesn't want to talk about the
Mm-hmm.
womanizing. But it seems like a part of his life that could have been mined more.
Yeah, yeah, and another thing that he talks about as well that's related to the MMA aspect of the podcast is just the whole recounting of him putting together Lemonade and being in Vegas. And he mentions UFC 100 briefly. I mean, it doesn't seem like he attended it at all, but just hearing how, Lemonade, which is arguably probably his biggest song,
Hmm.
would you agree?
I
But
think it
like
is.
hearing
Yeah.
about how that came, yeah, but hearing about that and how it came about and the tweaks that were made by Bangladesh was super interesting, and you get hit pieces like that throughout the book
Hmm.
itself, but nothing like that relates to more of his more mainstream successes. I mean, I guess you do, right? We do get we get more bits and pieces about Spring Breakers than we
Hmm.
do most of his other projects, but more of that, the recounting of specific processes, and maybe it's just because I'm a real nerd about
Hmm.
that shit. And maybe that appeases me, but a little bit more of that would have been more appreciated for sure.
Yeah. That lemonade part was pretty cool. Yeah, Bangladesh is into the fights, so he was in Vegas, and then they got together. That card was Lesnar versus Mir 2, I think, and
Yeah, yeah,
St. Pierre versus Thiago Alves.
and that's where we got that devastating knockout of Michael
Hmm.
Bisping at the hands of Dan Henderson.
And there was a John Jones fight on the undercard. So maybe
Who?
even John Jones and Gucci Mane were partying maybe at the same places.
Yeah,
I would,
it's very
yeah,
likely.
yeah. I feel like Spring Breakers was gone into a lot.
There was a beanie that I really wished I had purchased
Mhm.
after the release of Spring Breakers. That was like a pink beanie with the ice cream cone like embroidered on it.
Oh, nice.
It was like a ski. It was like a ski mask with the ice cream cone embroidered
Those
on it.
ski masks were really
I just
popular. So yeah, overall, I think it's really man. I hope someone writes like a big sprawling book about Atlanta rap, 2006 to 2000. Uh, I don't know, 16.
Yeah, I mean because yeah, when he mentions all of the names and peoples that he's worked with, it's pretty impressive, and just like when he just mentions people that would roll through the studio and artists that he helped, whose careers he helped launch,
Oh,
I mean,
wait, one
gives
story
me.
that was really sad, and I remember this detail, but I forgot it. So, Slim Duncan was killed on his way to beat Gucci at the studio, and they were going to shoot a video for the V Nasty collaborative mixtape, which is just like a coincidence of tragedies.
Yeah, the V Nasty being the most egregious
Yeah.
fraction there.
Um,
Did you ever listen to that
yeah,
tape?
I love that tape. Well, I don't love the tape. I like two songs on it. Squares in My Circle, I think, is really good. Actually, that was one of my favorite songs that year. But the rest of it is really bad.
Interesting. Oh, I imagine, yeah.
Let me see which one. Oh yeah, so Out My Circle is my favorite song on it. That has V Nasty on the hook. Yeah, I think everything else sucked.
Yeah, and it's funny how he discredits that tape.
Yeah, it's just like easy 200 grand, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it's quick, easy
That
money.
was a lot. That's a lot of money to pay for like a throwaway mixtape. Who?
Oh yeah, for sure. But I mean, well, it was backed by Vice and Asylum, and Warner Bros. So I'm sure some of that money came that way. But like you said, I mean, that's 200K. That's a lot of money just to pay for a tape that I feel like even if you are on the supporting end of V Nasty's camp, it's like who's gonna care about this tape, especially in 2011 where it's like maybe the hype associated with the white girl mob or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Was that what they
Yep.
were called?
Yep.
The white girl mob. I feel like especially at the time that this tape was released, I feel like that hype was on the like it wasn't as they weren't as hot. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Krayshawn didn't release an album; she just had that one hot single,
Yeah,
and
it was kind of fading.
mm-hmm.
Maybe they just signed V Nasty to some deal, and then they were like, "Fuck, we gotta put out some music." And they were like, "Well, maybe I'll team her up with Gucci Mane and see what happens." Well, it does go to
Mm-hmm.
like Gucci's just willingness to do a tape with anybody, which is he puts out like a lot of collaborative stuff. He's a lot much better than this. I mean, he did Ferrari Boys around this time, which is a great collab with
Oh
Waka.
yeah,
He hardly
with
talks about his
Waka.
relationship with Waka. He just
Yeah,
says like, I'm
he
mad
just
at him at sometimes, and he's like,
yeah, yeah.
Waka Flocka and I had when he talks about Slim Duncan dying, he says Slim Duncan was great because when Waka and I would get in fights, he would
Yeah, he
always
was the voice
yeah
of
he would always
reason.
bring us back together. But besides when he was in prison and Waka bullies someone to get a song in the studio, like besides that, he hardly talks about he hardly talks about the relationship at all.
Yeah, and going into this, I know they've had beef. Still don't quite know what it's over, and it definitely involves Waka's mom,
Hmm.
Deb Antony. I was kind of bothered by that as well because I was kind of hoping to get some detail regarding that because it's like we know they have beef and we don't get that, and I knew that him and Young Jeezy
Hmm.
had beef, but I wasn't as interested in that beef as I was.
Yeah, he goes way more into the Jeezy than to the Waka.
Yeah.
I mean, not only doesn't he talk about the beef, he doesn't talk about their relationship when they were on friendly terms. I mean, he says like Waka was someone who was around. He gave him his rap name, and the dude started rapping, and then he got famous when I was in prison. But he doesn't talk about like what they would do when they were friends, you know.
Yeah,
And by the
exactly.
time he set up the brick factory, Waka was sort of doing he was more focusing on his solo career. So yeah, I would have just liked to know like what Waka was like and stuff like that. Oh, speaking of Jeezy, that I mean, I guess yeah, that wasn't that interesting. But listening to the songs, they had much more chemistry apart than they did together. Like the two beef songs. I forgot there were like two main songs that were. I mean, there's the one where Jeezy puts out the $10,000 bounty on Gucci Mane's chain, and then there's one he came back with that featured. I think the rapper was called Magic. That guy was really lame, but yeah, he was this guy who was trying to get a name from inserting himself into the beef. That song was really good. But then the song that they did when they reconciled, and then So Icy, which was the song that made them enemies. Neither of those are as good as the beef
Hmm.
songs.
No, I think and so icy was one of the bigger
Yeah,
tracks as well. That was one of the intro tracks that I had become aware of.
the just him describing the process of working with Jeezy on that one was pretty interesting,
Hmm.
and also just hearing the differences between working with Mike Will and working with Zaytoven were really great.
Yeah, he criticizes Mike Will, right? Almost kind of like a real like sneak diss where he kind of talks about how Zaytoven wouldn't
No, I
criticize
don't think he
him
was dissing him. I think he,
about it was I think he was more. I mean, it wasn't like a diss per se. It was like him kind of I obviously outlining their
yeah. I
methods.
mean, he did say that Mike Will did stuff that Zaytoven would never do, but he still worked with
Hmm.
him and he called on him to do tapes and stuff. So I'm sure I think he appreciated the chutzpah of Mike Will, who just I guess he would always be like, you need to go harder than
Hmm.
that, or he would he would tell them how to write. He would write hooks, which I guess Beethoven doesn't do as much.
I think that's what I was getting at is that he might have, in saying all of that, been trying to praise him for a different approach and maybe helping him own skills in that sense because the trapback tape that he more or less puts together that's predominantly Mike Will made it is I think alongside the Burprint 3D one of my favorite Gucci releases.
I don't. I didn't put a lot of time into listening to Trap
No,
Back, but
there's
Burprint 3D is one of my
yeah, it's
favorites.
really good.
Yeah, is that the one? Is that the same as the movie? Because he talks about the movie with DJ Drama.
Yeah, it's the same as the movie from as far as I know that it has the
Okay.
same track listing.
Oh,
It's the
okay,
same,
okay.
yeah.
So the movie is Burprint
Hmm.
3D. Got it. From Atlanta, where we don't bump the Blueprint 3. That's a famous Gucci line. Which we don't bump the Blueprint 3 anywhere, hopefully.
Which what songs were on the Blueprint 3? I have a hard time
I think, isn't that the one that had the Alicia Keys song, New York?
pulling up the track list. Right? Yep, that's it. Oh man, this has
Ugh.
awful songs on it. It has "Run This Town" on it, "Empire State of
Uh,
Mind." On to the next. On to the next one was kind of a banger.
I don't have a problem with Run This Town, actually. Though, that might just be me, like, loving Rihanna right
I think
now.
that's also.
Death of Autotune?
Uh,
Oh my god. Actually, I was into that song when it came
uh,
out. Even though I didn't have a problem with Autotune, but I thought it was cool that Jay-Z was coming out and being like, yeah, I'm going to say that I'm not doing it. But, looking back on it, no, that wasn't cool.
yeah. Although New Empire State of Mind holds a weird place in my heart because it's like it was huge on the radio when I had first gotten a job, and I'd have to set my alarm to like 6 a.m. and like I remember laying in bed when my alarm would go off and that song would play, and I'd be like, God damn it, I hate waking up before noon. Also, shout out
That's
to
funny.
Jose Aldo. He didn't walk out to run this town last night.
Oh yeah, what did he I was listening to music during the walkout, so I didn't catch any.
I don't know what he
You,
walked out to.
you don't know?
It might have been like a Brazilian track, but yeah, he didn't walk out to run this town, which is interesting.
Well, I also think this book is probably better than Jay-Z's book. Have you read Jay-Z's book?
No,
Well, I think actually that one is even worse than this one for non-disclosure.
really,
Like
huh?
he was originally setting out to write a memoir, and then he kind of pussied out and then wrote like a memoir slash like explanation of his lyrics. So basically, just like insider genius annotations. I mean, because like Jay Z fucking he shot his cousin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's in the book, but like, yeah. I mean, from what I get from Jay Z, he's like a very he has a very manicured image, and I couldn't see him like wanting to open up. I mean, maybe he'll do that in a few years, which would be interesting. But yeah, I assume this book is way better than Decoded.
Now I'm interested. I might check that one out.
Okay.
Would you say it's worth my time?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't read it.
Well, shit.
Just like I haven't listened to 444. Well, you check it out and then let me know if it'd be worth talking about. Maybe we could go back into different book reviews. We could talk about Pieces to Wait.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading the Eminem book a few years ago and I really liked it.
I was thinking about how cool it would be to do something of a retrospective on Flockavelli, or even going back to take a look at 1017 Thug as well. That was my first exposure to Young Thug, which Gucci references here, and I thought I thought it was super fucking cool that he talks
The
about
story
him.
of signing Young Thug is amazing.
Yeah, and he talks about hearing him record Two Cups Stuffed, which is my favorite track off that tape. It was awesome. I like that whole story, and just like the minor like issues he had with letting go of Migos and Young Thug.
Oh man, like yeah, I that story of signing Migos was great. Yeah, he came across so much talent, which was just a part of his desire to not distance himself from the very bottom rungs of I'm not gonna say the bottom rungs, but the entry level dudes. Yeah, he signed like a lot of talent. But yeah, maybe he should have had better business practices and just like giving them a stack of cash and then chain.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he made a bunch of money off Migos and Young Thug and
Yeah, I'm sure it's somewhere in a contract he's still entitled to some form of royalties.
yeah, I think he sold Young Thug's contract.
And
But he
I
doesn't
think he
mention
also
selling like Migos or so one of the beefs that he also is not sympathetic in at all was OJ the Juice Man, where he's like, yeah, when I was in prison, OJ took this song. And meanwhile, this is a guy he's known since he was like 8 years old. He's like OJ like took the song and put his verse first, and then promoted it as his song. Like, first of all, you're in prison. Second of all, he did the hook. Third of all, this is like your childhood friend. Like, let him take like this one song. Like, and it's a great song, and it's like mostly I'm saying this even though the most famous version now that we know of now is like the version that OJ put out there, but the song like OJ makes it, like
And this is Make the Trap Say A? Is
yeah,
that the
make the
one?
trap say
Yeah.
A, yeah. But he gets mad at OJ the Juice Man for stealing the song, and I guess he got mad at Deborah Anthony at the same time, and then he says like, "Don't misunderstand me. I wasn't jealous, but it was just really just him being an asshole, and he doesn't do a good job of like admitting that." So yeah, let's not go on too long on this one. Overall, I mean, I think if you're a Stitch Gang listener, you should definitely read this shit. It's really interesting. Listen to all the tapes alongside because Gucci's one of the most important rappers of our generation. It's really interesting how mainstream he's gotten. He had like, there was like the free Gucci era, and then he went to prison again, and that like let his legend grow. I was actually like a few months ago when Black Beatles was really hot. Um, I was in a bar dancing, and when Gucci's verse came on, this like white girl was like, "Yeah, Gucci," and it's like his verse on that is not even that good, but Gucci is just an icon now. He's just like someone people love.
And like it goes back to Spring Breakers as well. I think
Yeah,
a lot of people I know who are familiar with him rather. A lot of it stems from his appearance in Spring Breakers.
Okay, so next week you're visiting me here in New York.
Yes, sir.
You're gonna be sleeping just a few feet away from my studio. I don't know if we'll have time to do a live one, but that could be cool. So yeah, we'll report back on your visit next week.
Looking forward to it, man. I'm looking forward to getting out there and suffering through the weather there.
Go to the barbershop, see what's hot in New York.
Yeah, we need to find the mixtape spots, dude.
Sounds good. Let's do it. We'll see you next week. Cool. I like reviewing as well.